want to start by asking a couple of questions jointly of Dr. Thacker and of Mr. Tryon. Feel free to jump in either time either of you can respond to this. As far as I've been able to tell, the last time a hearing was conducted here on this issue was 2002. Can either of you tell me roughly how large the wild horse and burro population was on federal lands in 2002?
I don't have that statistic immediately at my, but
Okay.
it looks like Dr. Thacker may.
That's fantastic. It is not essential if you don't have it. My understanding is that it has increased substantially since then. So
Yes, sir.
Let me know if you come across that. Under current management practices, if nothing changes, how many horses do you think will there be 2 years from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now? What does the rate of increase look like?
So I'll take an initial answer at that, sir. We expect the recruitment rate for the 88,000 horses that have been mentioned to be roughly 16,000 animals that will overwinter. That's how many will be born and will survive through the winter, which could increase to as many as 20,000 the following year if there are no other interventions, if we do not scale up contraceptive use or scale up removals of animals. And I believe you quoted a figure of as many as 500,000 animals if the program goes on in its current glide path.
In what time period would that occur? Would it be up to
So
500?
by 2029, 2030, if no more horses are removed, given the apparent growth rate, will be at about 500,000 horses, give or take a few.
Okay. Can you explain to us why wild horse populations grow at such rates, at such exponential rates?
As I mentioned in my testimony, part of the problem is they're a non-native species and there are no natural predators. So like with other wildlife species, you have predators that help control those populations, or we actually manage those as humans. Wild horses don't have any natural predators, so basically by the time a foal reaches a year old, the chance of it living to 15 plus years is quite high. So there's no other natural large ungulates or herbivores that live in our western landscapes that experience that kind of growth or survival.
Right. So in the case of cattle, they're typically being managed by someone who owns them. In the case of something else, they might have a natural predator.
Right. Well, cattle are not allowed to grow exponentially because they're managed. On public land specifically, they're managed very tightly by the BLM and the Forest Service, again, prescripting timing, intensity, and the numbers. And so those animals are usually managed quite tightly.
Mr. Tryon, is there any scenario in which fertility control alone bring an overpopulated herd to AML?
I think there is a scenario. It's going to require a significant investment. So fertility control from the BLM's perspective is all of the above. We will use Gonacon and PZP in 2 formulations. PZP has been mentioned by a couple of the witnesses already. We certainly would be interested in looking at the effectiveness of IUDs as a research project. And BLM is very much open to the idea of spay and neuter or sterilization, particularly for the mares, where it's going to be more effective. This is not a technique that at the $80 million budget that we're operating at can get us to appropriate management level without the additional gather and removals that are going to have to accompany it.
Why not go in that direction toward the sterilization, then, if that would be effective?
We are intending to do so, Mr. Chairman. In fact, we've been pursuing a study in Burns, Oregon for a couple of years now, which we intend to go forward with in the fall, that looks at behavioral characteristics of mares that have been spayed once they've been reintroduced to the field, which is one of the questions that the public has about sterilization. And certainly we would be open to using spay and neuter techniques in gathers throughout the West. It is something that we need to gather additional data on, but we're very much open to it.
Are there herds in which overpopulation has led to starvation?
Yes, and I believe Dr. Thacker has said as much, but BLM last summer, so in 2018, had to intervene in roughly half of the gathers of the 11,000 animals that you mentioned. Roughly half of those were in some amount of distress because the interior West was going through a substantial drought in 2018. And so rather than haul water to water sources over months and sometimes into years, our direction was instead to gather the animals, get them down to AML, and make sure that the water that was present there was sufficient for the appropriate management level.